as a preview for our next panel, we're going to talk about what life is like after conviction for people who have very long sentence enhancements. We're going to hear from someone who's served a lengthy sentence for gang-related homicide and is now out. We're going to hear from somebody who is currently in CDCR serving a 33-year sentence for a drug-related offense, 25 years of which was for the drug enhancement. And then we'll also hear from CDCR and their perspective on running prisons where people have long sentences because of sentencing enhancements. So I will take another 5-minute break till 4:25, and I'll see you back in 5 quick minutes. Thank you very much. Hello, I'd like to get started. I know some of the committee members have to jump sooner than later, and we're running a little bit long. So I'd like to get right back into this. Senator Skinner, if you're here and could turn on your camera and assembly comm logger, I'm going to start to introduce the panel. We have three people on this panel as well. First, we have Jay Vasquez, who is part of the Participatory Defense and Policy Coordinator for the Communities for United for Restorative Youth Justice. Jared Lozano, who's the Associate Director of the High Security Mission for CDCR. Thank you. And Obed Gonzalez, who is currently serving a 33-year sentence and is incarcerated in California City Correctional Facility. One note before we begin, because Mr. Gonzalez is joining us from the correctional facility, which you may hear us refer to as CAC, I'm going to do a longer intro for him and ask some initial questions when it comes to his time for opening remarks. For the rest of you, if you could please, as I've said to all of our participants, keep your opening remarks to 5 minutes, and then we will get into a question and answer period. Mr. Gonzalez, if you can take off your mask, I think that would be helpful for us. Terrific. Let's start with Mr. Vasquez for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you. My name is Jay Vasquez, he, him, and his. I'm the Participatory Defense and Policy Coordinator at Communities United for Restorative Justice in Oakland. Also in my senior year at SF State, I'm gonna graduate in May. Sociology, I'm excited about that, first generation. But yeah, at 16 years old, I was charged as an adult and given 31 years to life with gang enhancements and gun enhancements, which I went to state prison for. And I just wanted to just touch on that hearing people speak earlier, it was a great conversation, but I've never met anyone that in the 25 years that I did while I was incarcerated or even before, were deterred from committing crime because of gang enhancements. I've never seen it be a deterrent in my experience. Just want to put that out there. But yeah, so when I first went to prison, traditional age youth, from what I've learned, is that they're most vulnerable when they first enter the prison system. It don't matter what kind of background they came from. They come from the most hardcore neighborhoods. Once they go to a prison system, it's a lot different, especially if you're going to a level 4 yard. Having said that, they're very vulnerable in being shaped in either way, in a way that could possibly send them on a path that could possibly get their life together, or send them down a different path. And it's huge on the type of people you're around, the environment you're with when you're in that environment when you're at a young age. And to have those positive influences or those negative influences have a huge impact. And having said that, I had the privilege of going from Tracy Reception to a Mill Creek A yard. It's like in the summer, early '96, and it was a yard that actually had some pretty good programs. And I was at this pivotal point in my life where I look back on it now, and I could have made some really good decisions at that time, but I didn't notice at the time. But when I went to my first ICC committee, they had said that I was supposed to be there because of my gang enhancements, that I had to do 3 years in a level 4 180. I was on level 4 270. And a level 4 180, which I didn't even know what a 180 was, but at the time was a very, it's a yard where they send the shoe kickouts, people that are very much gang involved behind the prison walls or have committed some type of serious acts of violence, and they were sentenced to a shoe term. And when they get out the shoe, they would go to a 180 yard. And so that's where they sent me, from a yard that I thought I was going to do pretty well on. And going to that yard, it's just, I've seen a lot of stuff that I wish I could unsee. But it set me on this path that eventually it sent me to a place where the changes that I made later on in life, those could have been made a lot sooner had I been put in a different environment with different mentors. And so with the gang enhancements that I've experienced post-conviction actually kept me from turning my life around earlier than I could have. You know, I could have did a lot sooner, but everybody makes their own choices, and I get that. But just knowing how pivotal it is when youth finally go into prison and going to prison, and they're surrounded by certain programming or certain individuals, I see the changes that people can make. Having been on the other side as well, and having created and co-founded a youth mentoring program Behind the Wall and mentored youth coming into the prison system, I've seen the positive changes that they can make having the guidance that they need. I also want to touch on, so not only sending the gang enhancement sent me to a really violent place Behind the Wall that prolonged my change process, but also too, it actually kept me from actually, I went to parole board my first time in 2012. At the time I had served 19 years, and I didn't know at the time, and the commissioners didn't know at the time, but they actually took me early. And so my parole was vacated, and the reason it was vacated is because you have to do 15 years minimum when your gang enhancement is in conjunction with a felony. Mine was a homicide, very serious. And although I had already served 19 years, the 15 years didn't count in that. It didn't count until after I had already served, after 10 years. I had served 10 years first, and then my 15 years would start after that. And so
I'm
yeah.
sorry to interrupt. I want to keep us on time a little bit because some of us have to go. We definitely want to hear about your story and about the experience of being in prison for a long period of time, especially under these enhancements, which we will definitely get to. But I want to just keep everybody on time. And so I'm going to move to Mr. Lozano. And if thank you, first of all, thank you for joining us from CDCR. It looks like you're in the office. And I was wondering if you could talk to us about CDCR's experience and handling and trying to help rehabilitate folks who have very long prison sentences.
Yes. So good afternoon, Chair and members. My name is Jared Lozano. I'm the Associate Director of High Security Males Mission, here Division of Adult Institutions within CDCR. And I'm so honored to be able to participate with you all today, and thank you for the invite. A little background on CDCR and what we do here. All incarcerated persons, they go through the reception center classification process regardless of the length of time that someone is expected to serve in CDCR. This process includes creating a classification score for each individual, and score largely dictates the security of and level of the facility that the individual will ultimately be housed in. The scoring system is based on multitude of factors, and for the purposes of today's hearings topic, these factors include consideration of the length of an individual's sentence, as well as whether the individual's commitment offense includes violence or membership in a gang or a security threat group. Consideration of these factors is also part of the determination. Administrative determinant is what we call it, a violence administrative determinant. And this is placed on an individual's record if it is affixed to them. A Vial identifier can result in an individual not being able to be placed on a level 1 facility, the lowest security facility, as well as other limitations within the prisons system and programs. Some offenses relate to gang activity and firearms result in an automatic Vial being placed on the records of the offenders or incarcerated persons, while others require what we call a committee review or a case-by-case review. It is important to note that if an individual is convicted of an offense labeled as a violent offense in the penal code, it does not necessarily mean the individual will automatically have a Vial placed in their file. After a committee review, some individuals whose convictions offense labeled as violent pursuant to the penal code will not have a Vial placed as an administrative determinant on their file. Others will, depending on the circumstances, their past behavior, and in what kind of violence. The classification committee making the determinations whether or not to affix a violent administrative determinant or identifier on a case-by-case evaluation examines the totality of the case factors, including the following. There's 6 predominant things that we review. One is the circumstances of the offense, the extent of injury, the rationale for committing the offense, criminal intent versus neglect, history of committing similar acts, the safety of public, staff, and incarcerated persons. The department also has a process where even if a violent administrative determinant is initially applied, it will not necessarily be on the incarcerated person's file for the whole duration of his or her sentence. Our classification process also allows for them to have a violent review removal. And so they're able to get that removed based on their positive programming and participation in rehabilitative programs and being positive within the prison system. It is important to note that this classification process is only the initial determination for purposes of initial placement. And like I said, there's ways to receive that and get that removed. The department uses various avenues to override an individual's classification score in an effort to place individuals in lower security level if appropriate, but it's based on the individual's least positive behavior. And what we're trying to do is place the individual in the least restrictive housing environment that is allowed by their behavior. It also allows them greater access to rehabilitative programs. Notably, one of the programs we have includes the Youthful Offenders Program, which is established by AB 1276 in 2014. The other way that we're able to do this is we have what we call override codes. So for positive behavior in offender, incarcerated person in their annual classification review can be considered for a behavior override, which would then take them from a higher level secure prison to a lower level secure prison based on their rehabilitative efforts and their personal behavior within and conduct within the prison.
I think we'll have a lot of questions for you. I'm sorry to interrupt again, but I'm just going to try to keep us all on time because we have a lot to get to, and especially with Mr. Gonzalez might be the most difficult testimony here just logistically. So I want to make sure we get to him, but we're definitely going to have a lot of questions for you, Mr. Lozano, about the way that the prison system works with folks who have very long sentences. Speaking of which, our final panelist is appearing today from prison, from California City Correctional Facility. Before introducing him a bit more, I want to extend a really deep appreciation and thanks on behalf of the committee to CDCR for facilitating his appearance today. As you can imagine, it's quite unusual to have someone in Mr. Gonzalez's position appearing at a meeting like ours, and we obviously could not have done this without CDCR's help. In particular, we'd like to thank Oscar Rodriguez, Edgar Kuntz, Bill Sanders, Randy Nichols, Thomas Valdez, Warden George Jamie, and incoming Secretary Kathy Allison. That's just a few people to give you a sense about the organization about making this happen today. Mr. Gonzalez was arrested in 1998 when he was 21 years old for his part in a plan to attempt to steal drugs from someone he believed was a drug dealer. But the entire situation was actually orchestrated by police. As soon as Mr. Gonzalez and a co-defendant got into a van that contained keys in the ignition and drugs in the back, police pressed a button that shut down the van and arrested everyone on the scene. This was Mr. Gonzalez's first arrest. First time in jail, first time in prison. He was sentenced to 6 years for the attempted robbery, plus 25 years for the drug enhancement based on the amount of drugs that was put in the van by police. To date, he served 22 years. I've asked that Mr. Gonzalez not speak about the facts of his case for obvious reasons. He and I and Tom have spoken a few times. So I'd ask the committee members to avoid questions about his case, but instead to talk about the situation and what life is like in prison, especially for somebody who's serving such a long prison sentence. So I want to start the questioning with you, Mr. Gonzalez, and then we'll open it up to the group and to questions for anybody on the panel. But thanks again for joining us. It's good to see you again. First of all, I know when you entered prison, you didn't speak any English. Is that right? Wait, you're on mute, I think.
Yeah.
Is there somebody else in the room? Somebody's going to help you.
How can I see everybody else?
Oh, no, we couldn't hear you before. Now we can hear you.
I only see one person. I mean, Mr. Lozano.
Can you see me?
Yeah.
All right. So I start off saying, Tom and I were astonished to learn that you didn't speak any English when you went to prison. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
So how did you learn to speak
I started going to school. I was going to GSL, and then I started myself, started reading English books in English so I can learn more.
Okay.
I feel like I'm still learning. But first of all, I want to thank you guys for having me.
And so, you were in jail for 2 years, and then how long have you been in the prison system for?
20 years.
And how many different prisons have you been in?
Like around 10 prisons.
10 prisons. And that includes a stint that you did in out of state. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I went out of state. I believe it was in early 2009. I went to Arizona, La Palma, and from there I got in an airplane. They sent me to Mississippi, and I was there for like 6 years. And I was brought back in 2015.
Okay, and I gather that you weren't able to see your family, or I mean, when you were.
It was. I saw my mom in Arizona because she lived close right there.
And I mean, do you get to see your family much now?
I haven't seen my mom since 2009.
All right. And can you tell us a little bit about your experience, particularly in Mississippi, and how that compared to California prisons?
Mississippi was more like, it's cell living too, but you have like they give you games, they give you more programs. I was in the drug program away for like 3 years. I started and I finished it. And they got more schools from GSL to AB1 to AB3 and GD. So it was a little different than now that when I came back, they had that right in California too, but California had AB1 and AB2, but you gotta wait for your turn to get in there. Mississippi was like more easy. As soon as you go to you, as soon as you finish your orientation, they ask you what you want to do. So you can request either go to school or get in a program, and they will do it fast.
Can you tell us what kind of programs you've done and how do you get into programs, and what's the waiting list situation like, and what's been most useful to you, do you think?
It's hard in California, it's hard to get in programs because the list is too long. So by the time you—
The waiting list.
The waiting list is too long. By the time either you're going to reach to get it, then you get transferred to another prison, then you got to start all over again. You got to wait because most of the time they put the people they short to the house. Like if it's a person that he has like 2 years or a year to the house, they want to put him first, prepare the person for society. And now as they're doing time, we got to wait a little longer because we got time to do. So they keep us at the end of the list. So it's kind of hard. And I was in the drug program in Mississippi. I finished it, and then I went to Susanville in 2015. And they put me at work. They got me as a worker, but I want to get in the program. But they told me I gotta quit my job so I can get a program. And it's a little process that you gotta do. That you gotta go through, and sometimes it's hard to get in.
And when you were first sentenced, you were put on a level 4 yard. Is that correct?
I started level 4, the hatchet.
And that's the maximum security prison in California. When and you didn't speak any English, and you were 23 years old, I think. Can you just tell us a little bit what that's like?
For a person that don't speak English, it's a little hard because every time an officer want to ask you something like you got to go somewhere you don't understand, so it's a little hard. You got to get somebody with you that can help you. So it was one of my goals, like I got to do all this time, so I got to learn something so I don't have these problems. Because sometimes even the officers, they feel that you're probably just lying to them, that you don't want to speak English, so you don't know. Like, but yeah, it was hard, you know. So
And I think you told us that a couple of guys took you kind of under their wing, and sort of told you.
The aim is that they tell you, you know, like, you know what, so you don't get in trouble. So there's a lot of people that like they help you.
All right. Before I open it up to the rest of the committee, just want to get a little bit of what your day-to-day experience is like. Can you just describe what your current cell looks? Just tell us what your current cell looks like.
My current cell right now it's like a 12 by 6, a little bigger than the ones in level 4, level 3. Too bad.
So just to stop for a second, that's 12 feet by 6 feet.
If I'm correct, yeah.
Roughly, right? I know you don't have a tape measure, and that's bigger.
The ones in level 3, level 4, yeah.
Yeah, and there's two people. You have a cellmate, right?
Yeah, cellmate, yeah.
And there's a toilet and a sink in there.
It's a toilet and a sink, and then you get boxes so you can put your property on the boxes so you don't have it on the floor, and you got like a little locker area so you can write your letters.
Okay. And I understand because of the virus, you're under what's called modified programming. But in reality, what that means though is that you are on most days in your cell for 23 hours or 22 hours a day. You get to go out of your cell for 1 hour twice a day. Most days you do get some yard time. But that's the way it is most days.
3 days a week, yeah.
But aside from those 3 days, how long is yard time?
Like 2 hours.
Okay, so you get yard time 3 times a week. Otherwise, you have to stay in your cell, and every day you get an hour into what's called the day room, which is kind of a larger group room outside of your cell. But you only get 1 hour or 2 hours a day, 1 in the morning and 1 in the evening for that.
Correct.
And you have all your meals in your cell.
Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to give everybody a brief sketch of what it's really like in prison. Thank you so much. I see Senator Skinner has her hand up, so let's start the questioning with her.
Thank you, and thank you for arranging this panel. And apologies, I will have to jump off because I also have another Zoom. But my question is to both Mr. Vasquez and Mr. Gonzalez. So we have been talking about enhancements. We've been talking about various things, and some of these sentences that were passed, whether enhancements or other, the belief that it was going to deter people. And so I want to get your perspective. Had you any understanding of any of the sentences that existed? Would you have understood for it to serve as a deterrent, or do you have the experience that other people that you're with? So just give me some points of view around this notion of a deterrent.
Vasquez, you want to start?
I could go. Yeah. Thank you, Senator Skinner. Yeah, I mean, back when I was 15 and 16 years old and I got locked up when I was 16, you know, that wasn't even a thought, you know, that wasn't even a thought about enhancements, gun enhancements, gang enhancements. I was offered a deal, 32 years to life before I went to trial. And that was largely because of the enhancements. And I just didn't even understand where those came from. You know, I really didn't have an understanding of those, right? Until much later. And then, but even when I come to understood them, and just my experience being inside and getting involved in programs and helping other men and mentoring and tutoring and delving into that, and I facilitated groups like to help people get out of gangs. I had never once heard of anybody, not one person, talk about being deterred from committing gang activity because of gang enhancements. I've never heard of it. And I served over 25 years inside prisons, many different prisons. And I've been through many different circles. A facilitator for gangs and criminals, Gang Members Anonymous. So I've been through a lot of different circles like that, and I never once heard of that.
Mr. Gonzalez, we've talked about, you knew what you were doing was wrong. And we've talked about how you fully, own up to your crime. But why don't you tell us about what it was like? Did you have any idea that you could serve such a long sentence?
No, actually not. When I was sentenced to 33 years, I remember like it was yesterday still. And I went to prison thinking that because nobody got hurt in my crime. Thank God, nobody got hurt. There was no victims involved. There was weapons involved, but no victims. Nobody got hurt. It was no guns fired, nothing like that. So, but I understand the court, like I had no idea what I was doing. I thought I was writing my case thinking like, okay, I'm a first timer. They're probably gonna give me less time. So when they sentenced me when they give me the sentence to 33 years, I thought to myself like, oh, they're gonna find out they make an error. They're gonna know like, oh, we should send this guy to prison for 33 years. So, and I believe that they sent me a lawyer, which is a public defender, to help me with my appeal. And we start putting paperwork so I can reduce my sentence. I was not asking to let me go home, just reduce my sentence. And they denied me this. They said that I deserve those 33 years. So maybe I did. Maybe on the eyes of the law, I committed a terrible crime, and they gave me those 33 years, thinking that okay. But I find out later that the reason I got 33 years is because of the enhancements. I got 2 enhancements in my case. One, it was for drug enhancement, and the other one was gun enhancement.
And did that go into any part of your thinking about whether or not to commit this crime or commit crimes in general?
Excuse me?
Did the length of sentence, or did you have any appreciation? Well, it sounded like you didn't even know that these enhancements existed. So how could they have possibly
I had no idea.
deter your offense? One thing that I don't think that you were around earlier today. We heard from Governor Brown, Jerry Brown, who talked about new laws that have been passed in the past 5 or so years, giving people new opportunities to work their way out. SB 260, youth parole, 1170D, Prop 57. And you and I have talked about this. Do you feel like these have changed attitudes amongst people? I don't, it's hard for you to speak for everybody in the prison system, but have they changed attitudes of folks in prison about chances to get out or how they're doing their time?
I think they did, because now you see a little more opportunities. Like if you do in college, you can reduce your sentence, you can get milestones, and then you prepare yourself for the streets. You go to education and you get milestones to yourself. So yeah, it's a little more, but it is a longer process. It's hard to get into because a lot of people is going in, especially they're treating the short timers. They get more chance. They get more chance than the ones that doing a long term. Like if you want to sign for a program, for a passive program like ABP or Anonymous, you put a request, you send it, and they tell you, okay, you're on the list, and you gotta wait for years and years. I've been waiting for almost 2 years.
Wait, say that again. You've waited how long?
For almost 2 years.
For what?
To get in the program.
We're just shaking our heads here. All right, I've monopolized some of the questioning. Do other folks on the panel have questions? Mr. Vasquez, was your experience, obviously you were able to get out,
Yes.
right? How long you been out? How many times did you get to board? And how do you feel about, so the dynamic of something that Mr. Gonzalez is talking about is that the people who have shorter sentences have more opportunity for programming than people who have longer sentences. And I understand some rationale for that, but I was wondering if you could explain some of that experience. You obviously were able to program or else you wouldn't have gotten parole. So I guess my question, 3 questions. How long have you been out? How many times did you go before board? And how important was programming for the board, and how did you make that happen for yourself?
For sure. No, thank you. Yeah, I've been out 22 months, so just a little less than 2 years. I did get out primarily because of Senate Bill 260, and Governor Brown did let me out before he left office. But yeah, so to answer those questions, that was that. And it took me 4 times to go to front of the parole board. The first time was vacated, as I stated earlier. So the first time actually didn't count. So I went there 4, but 3 counted. Yeah. So yeah, but I totally understand what Mr. Gonzalez is talking about. I myself had waited several years, 2 years, to get into the programs as well. But I also want to touch on, you talked about when those programs came about, is it to incentivize people to start doing programs, start doing better? And yes, definitely yes. Prison is a place that is hopeless and very, you know, a lot of people go in there, myself, I'll speak myself, I went in there, just, it's a hopeless place. And when Senate Bill 260 came out, I've seen so many people that turn their lives around just on having that hope that someday they could get out. And they still got to go in front of the parole board. You still got to go in front of that, which is not easy. You know, you really get, they know their stuff, right? So it's not just going to programs. You really got to internalize what you're learning and really have a change of heart, or the commissioners can see right through that. So it's not just going to programs, but going to programs will give you the tools you need to make those positive changes, to make those internal changes, to be able to show that from the parole board. And a lot of times people need to be incentivized to be able to go to those programs and put in the work, because it's not easy. But I've seen so many people, because these new laws came into play, and now they're incentivized to do college and do these different programs, and so they're motivated. You know, that's a huge motivator. You're saying I could get out a little earlier. I get a couple of weeks knocked off my sentence, or knocked off my sentence if I go to a program. I go to board a little bit earlier. If I get a college degree, that incentivizes people. But what it does, what I've seen is that even if they go there for those reasons, when they go inside those groups, and I've been in several groups, and I've facilitated several groups, they start to hear things. I started to hear things that made a lot of sense, started to help me think a different way and getting the tools that I need to turn my life around. So even if those just get people inside the door to get time off their sentence, it does wonders for their transformative change process.
Mr. Gonzalez, I just want to ask you real quick. We've talked about SB 260 and youth parole. That applies to people who committed their crime ultimately before they were 23, I think. Does that apply to you?
Yeah, I just went in 2018. I went to in front of the board. They notified me. I found out by 2016 that I fit the criteria, but I believe it's the 261 for terminated sentence, and then 2016, I think it was in the middle of the year, I went to a meeting with the commissioner, and then he told me that I was going to go on the board within 5 years. But he told me to prepare myself, but I didn't know how to prepare myself. I didn't know what they need. They just told me you gotta get ambassador programs and everything, but nobody helped me to get in. I was doing it myself, and in my mind, I think, okay, I still got 2021 to go to board, but from Susanville, they sent me to California City in 2017. I came right here at the end of the year, and in June, I believe, in 2018, I was already in front of the board. So I was not prepared. So they told me I had to wait 5 years.
So you got a 5-year denial.
Yeah.
Yeah. How many rule violations have you had in prison?
I got a couple. I'm not gonna lie. I got a couple of rule violations.
But not that many. I know.
Not serious. They're not so serious.
Yeah, no, we've seen your you were recommended to us by the secretary because, and what level yard are you on right now?
I'm on a level 2 yard.
Yeah, so you've worked your way down from a level 4 yard to a level 2 yard. Correct. Based on your lack of rule violations and your participation programming. Mr. Lozano, I wanted to bring it back to you. So there is this question about whether or not some of these new laws and programs that have been put in place by the governor and the legislature and others to create new enhancements, I mean, new opportunities to get out. I was wondering if the data, if either your anecdotal experience or if the data from CompStat reflects that behavior has improved as a result of these new opportunities. Do you think that, I hear that a lot, but do you think that that's accurate?
Well, I don't know if the data actually from CompStat would reflect it, but I know working in prisons, I started this department in 1997, and I just first and foremost want to congratulate Mr. Vasquez. It's great to see somebody get an opportunity and be successful out there and give back to the community. So he's one of many success stories, but I think I want to ensure that he knows that we really do appreciate him and his work there too. I would say from my experiences, anytime there is hope, anytime there are less people in prison and we have programs and our focus is on rehabilitation and giving somebody an opportunity to rehabilitate, it's less of an opportunity to commit violence. Do we still have issues? Absolutely. There are always issues in prison when we have people, a lot of people in there. But I've seen a changeover in my experiences with the focus on rehabilitative programs. And I know from my perspective, I also, in my written documentation that I provided, I provided the committee with 4 different facilities, 2 on a 270 type building and 2 on a 180 type building, and notated all the programs that we have there, which are vastly increased since the time I started prison. It's a lot more programs available.
When you say that you don't know that CompStat will bear that out, is that saying that CompStat does not bear it out, or you actually don't know?
I would not. I don't know that right offhand, but I can provide that information on my.
It's publicly available. I don't know myself. I'm just curious. You hear it anecdotally that these type of programs help. I was curious if you knew off the top of your head. Do others have questions, or I'm going to keep on asking these guys about their experience? So, Mr. Lozano, what do we do about this problem about programming for guys who have long sentences? I mean, is the simple answer, well, we have limited resources of programming and we have to prioritize people who are getting out sooner? Is it boiled down to that? Or because this 2-year waiting list for somebody who's in a level 2 yard who has been, is doing so well, just seems really not great.
Yeah, it does seem like a long time. I don't know the simple answer to it. I don't know that it's as simple as we don't have enough programs there, or we have to prioritize this. I know we do prioritize and different programs have a different priority based on where they really focus, but it's great to see our incarcerated persons really wanting to program and rehabilitate themselves. And I would agree with the committee that sometimes there are challenges with, 2 years seems like a long time, yes.
I want to thank you, Mr. Gonzalez and Mr. Vasquez, for sharing and for being here. I guess I just don't understand, Mr. Lozano. I don't understand the benefit to California or to these men and their families to being incarcerated for such long periods of time when the programming and the support is inconsistent. And without really understanding the true outcomes. And so I'm thinking, if we are creating laws through our penal code that do have long sentences, to what end? And I know this becomes a philosophical question, but we have to ask ourselves as a state why we're hoarding people in certain spaces. And if we are going to do that, why we're not really participating in something that is substantial to their own growth and their ability to get out.
Yeah, I don't disagree with the hoarding of the, I think I spoke about it a little earlier. I think our population when I started in the 90s was a lot more than it is today. We were using program areas, and we all know the history of the California prison system. We were using areas where were made for programming and housing people there. And so with that, I think we're headed in the right direction. I think the focus on rehabilitation with our name change and our focus on providing more rehabilitative services on higher levels. Level 4 180 facility would not have the type of programs or the amount of programs that they have now back in the 90s. And I think where we want to go, we're headed in that right direction and focused on rehabilitation and giving hope to our incarcerated persons to continue to better themselves and opportunity to rehabilitate. And so I'm excited to be a part of this organization and see the change that's come over in my almost 23 years in our department.
Mr. Vasquez, in your time in prison, did you feel like there was a change in culture? And could you describe that?
No, definitely. In the 90s, on the 180 yards I was on, and a lot of the other yards I was on in the 90s.
Oh, and let me interrupt here for a second. Whenever we talk with folks, either in prison or prison, there's so much jargon and acronyms and whatnot. So if you would describe what a 180 yard is and that sort of thing. Go ahead.
It's basically just the design of the building. You know, the 180 buildings are the 180 designs, like a half circle. And that just allows the person in the tower to observe the whole building. Whereas a 270 is more shaped like a horseshoe. So therefore the prison guard in the tower it's harder for that person to see the whole day room. So the 180s are closely monitored. They're easy to monitor. A lot of them have the chow halls connected to the buildings. So in the 270, you actually go outside to go to the chow hall. But 180 is all connected. It's closely monitored. It's like more secure. So yes, that's the difference. And just the 180s are just where they send people with long time, like myself. In the 90s, it has changed a lot, so much. Back in the 90s, I remember for years, there wasn't any programs, not even a waiting list. So forget the waiting list. There was just no programs. There's no waiting list to even get on. And there was no vocational trades. I opened at Salinas Valley in the summer '96. There was no vocational trades there on C Yard. There was no programs there. And it's just so crucial when people first come into the system to really, they're at a crossroads, most people, they're at a crossroads. And so it's so important that we give people the tools and the resources and opportunities to really tap into those resources early on. And so it is such a detriment that people are honestly such a long waiting list. And when they have long sentences, because I've seen it more times than not, myself included, that because those opportunities, and again, I made my own choices, so I don't want to blame anything, but at the same time, those opportunities weren't available, but the opportunities to get in trouble were, you know? So it's just like, I started heading down that path and I went down really deep in that. But had I been given those opportunities, chances are I could have went a different path early on. And if I could have did like that and those opportunities were there for other people coming into the system and they have to wait for 2 years or 3 years or whatever, or they have those opportunities to get a trade or go to college and do self-help, most likely they're going to be able to get the tools they need to make those changes early on, which is so key and so important.
So, Mr. Gonzalez, I wanted to ask you about that, about these opportunities or lack of programming. You get to, I can't wrap my head around this. I'm sorry. You were sentenced to 33 years. You're 23 years old. How do you not, how do you keep your head straight and continue to try to seek out these programs rather than, you know, I'm sure that there are, I don't know if temptations is the right word, but there's gangs, there's drugs, there's negative influences in prison that might seem tempting if you have so much time to do and no way to get out. How do you find it within, where does it come from? You obviously didn't go down that road, so why?
I think you gotta be strong and you gotta have your family. Your family is the one, they tell you to, you know, keep your head, keep faith. Have faith in God, have faith in yourself. You know, I mean, I put myself in this situation, first of all. I think you gotta be strong, and it's your life. You know, it's your life. You just gotta keep going. Keep your head up and focus on what you gotta do and what you think is right for you.
Now, you said you haven't seen your family in a while, and obviously when you're in Mississippi, it was very hard. How do you keep in touch with your family?
Writing.
Mm-hmm.
I write. I call my father once a week, twice a week sometimes.
Okay. And how about visits? How does that work?
No, I haven't had no visit from my father. Last time I saw my father was when I got sentenced.
And you haven't seen your mom in 11 years. Yeah. And Mr. Vasquez, did you have a similar experience like that with family? Was that how you found your fortitude? Where did you find it?
My family, yes. When I first got locked up, my father passed away when I was 15, which actually set me in the road to get involved in the gang. And my mother at the time was strung on heroin. But when she got her life together in the late 90s, it became a huge resource for me. And not just my mother, but like, you know, a few other relatives, a couple of aunts that I had that really helped me through it. But definitely, when you have nothing else to really look forward to, sometimes the littlest things like family could really get you going, you know, keep you going. You know, for a lot of years, I never thought I was going to get out. I remember I had a life sentence and
nobody was getting parole, right? So
right, and the governor even said, you know, the only way you're going to parole is in a pine box, you know.
Yeah.
And then when I first went in, the guard had said, he goes, "Hey, youngster, you go do yourself a favor and hang yourself." And I didn't know what he meant by that. And he goes, "You're never getting out." So back in the 90s, that was true. Lifers weren't getting out. And so I was hopeless at that time. But yeah, when I started striving and striving to do better, just having the hope and doing it for my family and the people that I've harmed, really, it really motivated me. I was like, you know what, even if I never get out, the least I can do is just turn my life around, you know. But by doing that, it actually got me out. So yeah, just finding those little pieces of faith, God, and family, and just trying to, you know, I can never erase what I've done, but just striving for that redemption as well gave me the push that I needed.
Mr. Lozano, I wanted to ask you about programming again, come back to it. I know that this isn't necessarily your area of expertise, and I don't want you to feel put on the spot to speak for all of CDCR, so, you know, but is this a resource problem? Is this some of these prisons are very far away problem, and we can't get at, you know, enough people to do the programming? Is this, how do we, what would be your advice to us as our committee to bring more of that R into the CDCR, and whether it's incentives or programming, what would be your thoughts and recommendation? And maybe it's money, but maybe it's other things. Do you have thoughts?
Well, to answer your first question, I think that every institution has a different level of programming, and to your point, based on location. An example would be San Quentin, Folsom, Solano State Prison. They have more programming. There are more volunteers that come in and perform those duties. I was the warden at California Medical Facility, in Vacaville, we had quite a few volunteers that wanted to come in and participate. You might have prisons that are on the outskirts or hard to get to or not as populated, that don't have that sort of support from the volunteer perspective. As far as what I would say to the committee, I think I said it a little bit earlier. I think we're headed in the right direction. I think the continued support of that R in our name, obviously, we're doing a lot of great things here. I work with a lot of great people that are working hard to do it. And you're right, this is not my area of expertise as the programming part, but I walk prisons, I work in prisons, I'm responsible for 10 prisons. And when you talk to incarcerated persons, when you talk to people, they always talk about exactly what Mr. Vasquez and Mr. Gonzalez are talking about, in a sense of hope, the hope, even our staff members at all different classifications there. So I would just encourage the committee to continue to support our department in the rehabilitation, and I think we're going to end up in a good direction.
So I don't know, were you around when Governor Brown was talking to us earlier today?
I was.
Okay.
Governor Brown is phenomenal, obviously, great person, and was able to meet him a few times. And the providing the hope, I know that over 5,000 lifers have been paroled through the board. It's given hope. It's in a sense, it makes it not only a better place to rehabilitate yourself if you're an incarcerated person, but it's also a better place to work if you're an employee, and that's important for everybody, and important for the incarcerated person to assist in rehabilitating, because our teams in the institutions are mentors, either positive or not so positive, whether we want to be or not. So I think that's important, in that hope that Governor Brown and his administration and Governor Newsom and his administration have focused on is wonderful.
Now, so one of the things that Governor Brown instituted, and something that we had actually been working with, trying to get CDCR to do since the Schwarzenegger administration, was do some of these 1170D meritorious conduct cases. Are you familiar with this process?
Yes, sir, I am.
Okay, so this is a process where the CDCR itself can identify folks that they think are ready to go home, and the secretary ultimately has to sign off on people who have they think are no longer needed to be incarcerated. So about 150 or 175 people statewide have received one of these meritorious conduct recommendations. I believe that that's the latest data. It's not far off, if that's not the exact number. When I told that to Governor Brown, because I know that he started it kind of at the very end of his tenure, he was astounded at how small the number was. And I was wondering if you had thoughts about how we might encourage CDCR to identify folks who they think are ready to at least get a reconsideration of their sentence in court, right? 1170D is a process where the CDCR identifies people to go back to court. It doesn't say, it doesn't automatically let people go. It just says, hey, judge, will you please take a second look at this case? I'm going to guess that surely that there are more than 175 people out of 180,000 who might warrant a second look. How can we, and maybe not, maybe you just disagree, but if you don't, how might we further encourage that?
Oh, I'm sorry. Thought I was still on mute. No, I don't necessarily disagree. I know I've worked at, I was the chief deputy warden at Folsom State Prison. We actively used the 1170D process. I know up here in our headquarters classification services unit, they have, I see the mail coming in on 1170D requests. So I know that we see them. We always have to keep that in the minds of our wardens, and in challenge our folks out in the field to identify these incarcerated persons that are rehabilitated. But I've experienced it from administrator perspective that at California Medical Facility, we also sent up cases and recommended to the secretary, and in both institutions that I worked at, he signed off and we referred him back to the courts.
I appreciate that, but still, it's been a tiny number, and at Warden Hill at Folsom has been, maybe almost half the cases have come from him. No, maybe not that many, but a lot. So earlier on, you probably also heard Jeff Rosen, from the DA from Santa Clara County, suggest that maybe there be some kind of incentives. I don't know if financial incentives are fair or legal or right, and I don't want to get into that. But how do you feel about trying to hold wardens in some way accountable or responsible for either recidivism or programming or lack of violence within their facilities? Does that seem reasonable to you?
I never really thought about that. I never have really considered that as something. So I don't know. I think it would be a little short-sighted, at least from my perspective, for me to provide that from right now. But every warden in every institution is tasked with a lot of different things, including the levels of the inmates that that they house, but also the level of programming. I think I just explained, it's some institutions have higher programming based on volunteers, and but I think the institutions have come an extremely long way in allowing people into the prisons, allowing paroled persons into the prison, incarcerated persons into the prison, to provide mentorship and to speak to lifers and other long-term offenders or even short-term offenders. So I don't know that I've really thought that out well enough to give you my opinion.
Is it fair do wardens have control over recidivism, or is that completely, do you think?
Well, recidivism is a tough thing, because obviously the wardens or even the parole agents or parole administrators, if they're on parole, can't be with them 100% of the time, and it really is somebody's personal decision to violate the law. And so for the most part, obviously there are reasons that people are more prone to do that and or forced to do that per se, but I think it would be tough to grade a warden based on recidivism necessarily.
Got it. We only have a couple more minutes on this panel. I don't know if Judge Espinoza or Assemblymember Kamlager, if you have any questions, but okay, so doesn't look like it. I'm gonna ask all three of you, this is magic wand time. If you had a magic wand, given what your experience is with the system from each of your perspectives, and could change one thing to make the system better, fairer, safer for everybody, improve public safety, reduce unfair or unnecessary hardship with the prison system, I'd love to know what your recommendations would be for us. Mr. Vasquez, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, it's only one thing, but if I had a magic wand, I would change the culture, and it has come a long way. Like Mr. Lozano.
Culture, is that what you said? Culture,
but it's still not.
And how would you do it?
It have to start from the top down. I think just the way there's a lot of very respectful staff, but some still have the old school mentality, the us versus them mentality, and that just creates a dynamic that is not conducive to rehabilitation. So I think just the environment is critical, but a lot of that has to do with the culture and the way people are treated. If people are treated like an animal, they most likely behave like an animal. Again, everybody's responsible for their own choices. I get that. But it's so crucial that we create this environment that helps the person see themselves as human and see themselves as worthy of changing.
Thank you. And remind us how long you served.
I served 25 years, 4 months.
And you've been out for two years, just about.
Just under 2 years.
Okay. Mr. Lozano, if you had a magic wand?
Well, I would say that continue, obviously, our rehabilitative programs, continuing to support our organization in thinking outside the box and doing things that we haven't done in the 20 years that I've been here. But I do Mr. Vasquez talked about culture of a prison, and culture of a prison is extremely important. And we focus on that as an organization an awful lot with our administration. And so I think it's just best support, give our incarcerated persons hope, and we'll also, I think, as an organization, that we continue to lead the way and show examples like Mr. Vasquez as an example to our incarcerated persons and say, see, there is more of this out there. More guys making successes and making things happen out there, which we're extremely proud of.
Thank you. And we would love your help to think outside the box. I mean, part of the whole purpose of this committee, as opposed to an ordinary legislative committee, is that we have some time to think and talk to as many people as possible. And, we really do want to hear outside the box ideas, and please, we will keep in touch with you, but if you have outside the box please be in touch with us. Okay, I'm going to give the last word to you, Mr. Gonzalez. If you had a magic wand, I'm going to say that your first wish is probably to get out yourself, which I appreciate, of course. But what would be your second wish?
I want either education and a health program, like to better yourself. Like if you got a group of people that go on a board, have those guys have access to those programs sooner than, so they can be prepared for that and give more education so they can prepare themselves for that. And I think it comes with the health program more, because that is what the parole board requests more, to help yourself, to better yourself.
And education programs in particular, as opposed to other types of programs.
Of course.
Yeah, and you go ahead.
Right here in California City, they got college, they got GD, they got ESL. I don't know if they got ESL, but they do got AB1 to AB3, and they got even sport programs. So, but the only problem for me is the health program, the ones that they're gonna make you better, so you can understand the circumstances of how you gotta act in the streets.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you all. Mr. Gonzalez, we wish you the best of luck. Keep it up. I tell all of my clients, I don't know what it's like to be in prison. I can't imagine, but you wouldn't have been invited to this and selected by CDCR. CDCR suggested that we talk to you if you weren't doing the right things. So please keep that up, stay out of trouble, and keep on doing the right things as much as you can. We wish you all the best of luck. We wish everybody the best of luck and appreciate everybody's time. Thank you, Mr. Lozano, Mr. Vasquez. We really appreciate your insights. We will be in touch, I promise. Like I said, no good deed goes unpunished. And this concludes our final panel of the day. We will have public comment after we take our last 5-minute break. So we will reconvene at 5:33. Thank you all again.
Thank you.
Bye.
That's it.
Hi, everyone. We're back. It's been a long afternoon, but I've certainly learned a lot, and I appreciate everybody's time. I think I think we made some real progress. So thank you all for hanging in there. I know that some people have been here since the beginning, eagerly awaiting perhaps to contribute to the public comment. So we've reached that time of our program. The way that this works is that if you'd like to make a comment, please use the raised hand function in Zoom. If you know how to do that, hold on, I just try to get the best light here as possible. And excuse me. Please use the raised hand function in Zoom. If you're calling in, you can hit *9. Please note that this meeting is being recorded, and if you make a public comment, your name or phone number may be displayed as part of the recording. If you'd like to comment, do so now. Let's take a minute to see how many people want to comment, and based on that, we'll see how much time we can allocate to each person. So please raise your hand now, and I'm going to fix my light here. Okay. Based on what I see here, it seems like a half dozen or so folks who have interested in making a comment. I'd like you to please keep your comments to 2 minutes. I'll do my best to respond. Also, I just want to thank publicly Tom Nosowitz, who is the lead counsel for the committee, who's been stage managing this whole hearing, and it's so thank you, Tom. He's chimed in a few times, and you guys see him on the screen there. So I'm just going to go down the list. Ani Torres.
Hi, hello.
Hi.
Hi, my name is Annie Torres, as you mentioned, and I am the wife of a currently incarcerated man serving only time based on enhancement. I wanted to bring up the fact that most men like his situation are currently incarcerated only because of enhancements which have been passed or were passed over 30 years ago and have perpetuated the cycle of incarceration and the cycle and the problem of overpopulation inside the prison system. Like my husband, if enhancements were changed, the prisons would, or the CDCR system or the state of California would be able to save over $81,000 a year per person released. Thank you.
Ms. Torres, do you have a minute?
Yeah, I'm here.
You still here? When you say he's
Yeah,
doing time only for an enhancement, can you explain that a little bit? If you don't feel comfortable talking about his case, but I am curious a bit.
Yes. So he actually was sentenced to 16 to life in 2005. And his base term was actually only 6 years for a home invasion, actually a robbery of an inhabited dwelling. And that was only for the robbery itself. The other enhancement time was for a gun. And then the rest of it was for a 1-year prison enhancement for having been previously incarcerated. And then the life enhancement, or the gang enhancements, which carry life.
Okay, well, thank you for your comment, and wish you all the best of luck.
Thank you.
Miss Benet Vinyar, I'm sure I mispronounced your name.
Yeah, it's Benet Vihar. Good afternoon. Thank you all for sticking around for so long and listening to our comments. I'm a community organizer with Silicon Valley Debug, and I'm also an impacted wife. My husband is currently serving a 3-strike sentence, non-violent. His charges were conspiracy to sell with the gang enhancement. Because it's a 3rd strike, my husband did prior prison term, and there was no signs of validation or anything like that during his programming time inside CDCR. Now with the gang validation implemented on his case, CDCR decided to go ahead and validate him through his case. So you know, like Mr. Gonzalez and Mr. Vasquez, my husband has been dropping points so quick that he is currently going from a level 4 to a level 3 to a level 2 good behavior override. But it's still, he's on a wait list to get into programming. So his tentative date for parole, thanks to Prop 57, is 2021. But if he goes before the board now, he has no programming. So I understand what Vasquez and Mr. Gonzalez are going through. But my husband is doing his best. We're keeping our spirits up. But we're from Santa Clara County, and to hear Mr. Rosen talk was very, he sounds progressive to you, but his audience is chosen a lot of the time. And in courts, we sit there every day to hear the enhancements that are getting handed down to families that I work with every day, families of community, families of color. The gang enhancement is getting thrown around like nobody's business. Like he passes it out like candy. Like Kamala Dove said, you know, it's not getting tuned in. It's from not coming down from the top. You know, there's the miscommunication there. The communication isn't there to be progressive. The communication's there to prosecute and persecute. You know, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. I do think it's worth mentioning at least that we didn't really talk very much or about 3 strikes at all. The reason why we largely avoided that topic is because it was, of course, passed by voter initiative. It can only be amended by another voter initiative or realistically amended by another voter initiative, which is beyond our power or anybody's power for the next 2 years at least. But it's worth mentioning, not only because there are people who are serving life sentences for nonviolent crimes, like your husband under 3 strikes, but the second strike provision, which is less well known about 3 strikes, it's doubling prison sentences. Mm-hmm. And it affects between 25 and 30% of everybody in prison. It is probably the most widely used enhancement. So it is, you know, having a huge impact on the prison population, and is, of course, one of the more difficult to change. So that's really why we've avoided that subject today, not because it isn't important, but because for practical reasons, we think it's difficult for us to address, at least right now, but it's definitely on our radar. Mr. Alvarez?
Hi, it's actually my son's Zoom thing for school, but this is Melissa. Okay. Hi, hello, my name is Melissa.
Distance
Warden.
learning is at its best.
Exactly. I haven't changed it. So.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Sorry. So yes, my name is Melissa Warden. My husband is at the San Jose Main Jail with a Romero hearing coming up. He is facing 25 years. He would be home right now if it wasn't for his prison priors, which I feel is a form of enhancements. So I don't understand why he has served his time already and paid for those things that he's done. So I feel like the prison system has failed him in terms of rehabilitation, and it's not a true way of rehabilitation, and there should be alternative ways of instead of prison to rehabilitate people and take their age, I guess, for one, as something that if they've done something when they were younger, to like not consider their age when they did something wrong. That's all.
Well, like I said before, we're avoiding talking about 3 strikes just for practical purposes, not because it's not important. Okay. Also, enhancements for either 3 strikes or prior enhancements. I mean, enhancements based on prior prison terms are certainly enhancements. They're not, you said they're kind of enhancements, they're actual enhancements. I fully support that. And I think what you said about this prison system or the system itself, their whole system failing as part of recidivism makes some sense. And I'll just, note that, no other than Jeff Rosen, you said I think your husband was in San Jose County Jail, was the person who suggested that wardens and CDCR somehow be held accountable for recidivism, because obviously it's the individual's, primary responsibility for their actions. I don't want to say that it isn't their responsibility, but certainly the system as a whole, if we're going to consider rehabilitation part of the state's responsibility, whether it's the prison's responsibility, parole's responsibility, school systems, everybody's responsibilities, it's a failure of all of ours. So your comment is definitely well taken. Thank you.
Thank you.
Danielle? Danielle?
Sorry, hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, so my name is Danielle. First, I just wanted to thank everyone who participated today. Enhancements are rarely brought up with reform issues, so I think it's really great that we're finally talking about it. My husband, Jose, he's currently incarcerated. He received 25 years at the age of 23. 20 of those years came from 2 enhancements. He's been incarcerated about 12 years now, so he finished his base term 7 years ago and has roughly cost the state of California about $525,000 since then. He became a youth offender under AB 1308. So now we have a youth offender hearing to look forward to, but for a lot of years, we just had those 25 years hanging over us. I just wanted to ask the committee to please consider, if it's possible, making the recommendations of the penal code or the revisions retroactive, because not making changes that would help those that are already incarcerated may help many in the future, but it doesn't help with the mass incarceration problem that we have now. There's so many men and women who are incarcerated who have aged out of that criminalistic behavior that led them to prison. So they're pretty much just losing time with their family now and ultimately costing the state millions unnecessarily because they're just not that, I don't want to sound cliche, but they're truly not that person anymore. So yeah, I just wanted to really thank all of you.
Thank you. And Judge Espinoza and Assemblymember Kamlager, if you have anything that you want to add, I don't mean to monopolize here. But I certainly agree in principle that if you're going to change a law going forward, that you should also change it going backward. I think people generally agree that with that principle, sometimes it's hard to legislate that way for politics reasons. That if you were here from the beginning when Jerry Brown, confessed to being a politician, of course. But if a prison sentence makes sense going forward, it should also make sense going backward to the best possible. So I definitely hear what you're saying, and in principle, I agree. So thank you for your comment. Joanne Shear.
Oh, hello, everybody. Thank you, members, for this time. I'm Joanne Shear. My only child was sentenced 13 years ago to as an aider and abetter under the felony murder rule, special circumstances. So I'm here once again. I've been at every hearing you guys have had, pressing for the committee to please address felony murder special circumstances, Penal Code 190.2A17. There is a way that we can legislate that to amend B, C, and D. My son was 20 years old at the time. He'd never been in trouble. The statistics are that 5,200 people are serving life without parole, which is a death sentence, and 3,700 of them were first-time offenders, and 3,221 were under the age of 25 at the time of the commission of the offense. If you're serving a life without parole sentence, you do not have the ability to program in prison. because you are not going to be coming before the parole board, they're basically just supposed to sit and twiddle their thumbs and wait for the day to die. I was listening to Mr. Rosen talk about the CDCR and paying them and offering them some kind of monetary privilege or monetary
Incentive
to do what they're supposed to do in the first place, which is if you're going to add rehabilitation to the California Corrections Department, then it is up to you to actually rehabilitate every single person who is under their jurisdiction, right? You can't take a 19 and 20-year-old kid and lock them in a cell and just say, well, you're not worth ever getting out. They are valuable to the prison system because they're used to mentor young people coming in. They're used to facilitate programs that they're most of them are not allowed to even attend. And we need to address this felony murder special circumstances, and I'm here to push that and ask you to please put that on your agenda. It's something that life without parole is not talked about. The death penalty is talked about, but this death sentence is not. And there is a way of undoing portions of this penal code. It doesn't have to be all about a ballot initiative. So we have the Drop LWOP Coalition has sent in a packet and shown a way forward and asked that this be put on the agenda. So I'm asking once again, if you would please consider putting this on the agenda.
Are you connected with Jerry Silva?
Yes.
Okay, so Jerry is, an old friend of mine, and I'm well aware of your work. And this goes not just for you, but for other folks who have, specific proposals and details with penal code sections and whatnot that you want us to consider. Certainly, you're welcome to this public comment, and it can be helpful. But please also email us, either me directly or Tom Nosowitz at the committee. Tom, I hope your email is somewhere available on the committee website, so we can look at those sections more closely, because sometimes the detailed comments need, it's better to have them in writing. I'm not trying to slough you off in any way, and I really do appreciate your persistence, your son's persistence, Jerry Silva's persistence.
Yeah.
So.
And just to let you know, we did send that to Tom Nosowitz on June 26th. We emailed them, and we also snail mailed you and the committee members with all of the information. We put it in writing. So
terrific,
so
terrific. That's all the right things. Unfortunately, snail mail is very hard to get these days for all of us. So, and you should know, just because we haven't responded, that doesn't mean that we're not considering it. Our recommendations we're not publishing anything in terms of recommendations until January. So, just so you know.
Okay.
But thank you again, also for being a regular at these gatherings that we have. Is it Jose from Jose Vial from the Silicon Valley Debug?
Hey, how you doing? Yes, it's Jose Vial from Silicon Valley Debug.
Hi.
Hi. Hold on one second here. Okay. So my name is Jose Vial. I'm with the Silicon Valley Debug. I am formerly incarcerated. I've been blessed to had never set foot in prison and actually doing time. I can say with confidence that if I would have, I probably wouldn't have been here right now. So it's definitely a blessing that I was able to rehabilitate before even setting foot in prison. I'm also a community organizer. for Silicon Valley Debug, which is a criminal justice reform advocacy organization that works directly with families who are directly impacted by the courts. So we know firsthand from experience and their stories and their voices how enhancements, things like strikes. I know we're not talking about strikes, but or LWOP or anything like that, but we see firsthand how these type of things, prejudicial gang evidence, gang enhancements, how it impacts largely Black and mostly Raza here in Santa Clara County because of our specific demographics, but we see firsthand. One comment I wanted to make, or a few comments I wanted to make, is that I think that the DA, anytime the DA has the ability within the penal code to use in their tool belt, they'll always aim towards a longer sentence. It'll never be in their interest to go on something lenient. So I really appreciate, you know, right now everyone's taking a look at the penal code, because as long as it's in there, you know, prosecutors are always going to shoot. They're always going to go high. They're never going to start low. I mean, quite frankly, that's the, you know, that's the attorney's job to do, right? That's the public defender or the lawyer's job to do, is to argue lower. There's probably no party more responsible for mass incarceration and the culture of police brutality, or even the negative connotation of what law enforcement sees as gangs, than the district attorney's office. I know that the DA, Jeff Rosen, he likes to see himself as progressive, or he has sort of slick talk. But to be quite honest, even with today, some of his words that he shared about, you know, because of the fact that a youth's mind is not fully developed until 25, that's why they're dangerous, right? So, I mean, even with that comment itself, it kind of shows you that as progressive as someone like Jeff Rosen may appear to be. I mean, me being formerly incarcerated, I mean, anytime that we had people from out of county that was in jail, I mean, you would always hear it like, Santa Clara County is just no joke. You know, they'll throw the book at you compared to other counties. I know that we also have a pretty good reputation on being one of the highest conviction rates. In 2010, the Fair Sentencing Act.
Jose,
Yeah.
I want you to ask you to wrap it up if you could, because we have other people in line and we're just trying to keep people to 2 minutes. So just make
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I'll
Thanks.
just go ahead and say this then. I'll just point out a personal experience. The issue with gang enhancements a lot of times is the culture that it creates, especially in the courts. I had experience one time where I was doing a court support for a family member, and they were there supporting their loved one that was in the courts on trial, and I think there was a gang expert or a couple of them that took like basically a whole week talking on gang evidence, none of which is actual evidence of the case, more so like historic or like kind of sensationalized, you know, violent history of a specific gang or gangs. And it frightened one of the jury members so much that, because she had seen two Latino males in the pews, she had basically panicked and had insinuated that, you know, maybe we were there to kill her, you know, or to intimidate her. Of course, we were not doing so. It became a big old fiasco. They had to ask every jury member, you know, pretty much the whole jury had potential to be tainted, you know what I'm saying, because of her reaction and some of the words that she shared.
Sure.
You know,
Listen, Jose, I'm sorry to cut you off. I mean, I hear what you're saying completely, and we, you know, you probably heard the gang testimony, the gang enhancement testimony. It's such a complicated issue because not just of the extra sentences and the obviously racial disparate impact, but just the way that the evidence is presented.
Sure.
And, you know, I say gang is a 4-letter word because it is. But, you know, it really does scare people in a way that can cause great problems, especially along racial lines, which is you know, some of the worst parts of our criminal justice system. And it's something that, you know, like I said, Governor Newsom, you know, specifically directed us to try to address. So thank you for your comment.
Thank you.
Christine Ford. Christine Clifford, sorry.
Here we go. Here she is.
Hi.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I just want to piggyback somewhat on what Joanne had to say regarding the statistics around LWOP. One that she left out is that 68% of the people serving LWOP in California are people of color. So when you're looking at the whole just disparate system and how it impacts people along with enhancements that may get them to something like an LWOP situation, I hope that you do keep in mind Joanne's words that people who have LWOP when they get into prison are the people that are given the least amount of hope. So if your average age is 19, these are people that normally would qualify for a YOP, but they don't get a YOP if they're LWOP. If there is some way, at least for this committee, to suggest that there be equal protection under the law for people under the age of 25, that they get an opportunity to have a YOP hearing, that would be one little bite out of the elephant of LWOP. Of course, my wish over time is that there is no LWOP. And there is no gang enhancements, and that there is more programming, and that there truly is a spirit of rehabilitation. So I just hope that there's more sessions going forward that talk about legislative alternatives, because I know you can't address things like that in this particular go-around. And I just want to take a moment to thank you for this incredible panels that you've put together today. It was very powerful, very moving, and I was really grateful to hear it all. So thank you.
Well, thank you. And like I said, our staff attorney, Tom, was largely responsible for putting together the panel. You know, you mentioned hope, and I can't imagine, as I said to Mr. Gonzalez, how you have hope when you get a 33-year sentence, and at least he gets a chance to come home. You know, LWOP sentence is just truly unfathomable to me, and how people maintain the fortitude, not only to put one foot in front of the other, but so many folks genuinely work hard to improve themselves, even when there's no, when they're told that there's no hope. And it's one of the things that I find most inspiring, actually, with my work with folks inside, is to meet people who, under the worst unbelievable circumstances, are able to go through some personal transformation, appreciate the extraordinary harm that many have done, and change themselves as people. And it gives me some hope, but I don't know how. And I think that there are some laws and some fixes and some changes that we can do to try to develop more hope in a positive way to make the system safer, fairer, and better. So I guess I just want to say thank you for your comment. It really resonates with me. And finally, Yoli, am I pronouncing your name correctly?
Yes. Hi, thank you. My name is Yoli. I'm also an organizer with Silicon Valley Debug. And I know we weren't touching on special circumstances, LWOP, but I did want to use this opportunity to let you all know that, my husband was 18 years old when sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. And on top of that, was given enhancements. He's now 33 years old, and, people serving this life without parole sentence are also sentenced like anyone else under California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, yet they're excluded from rehabilitative programs. And then not only that, recently in the end of 2019, they're recently excluded out of the 1170D due to emergency regulations. And I know you touched on that penal code earlier. However, regardless of the exclusions, people serving the sentence still strive to find ways to work on themselves for the betterment. And also they are being commuted through, Governor Brown and Governor Newsom, and, are have been paroling home, doing well, and getting back to the community. And also just want to mention, lifers are like less than 1% recidivism rate. And then just to build off of Christine and Joanne earlier, I would just like to see this as an agenda item in a future meeting.
I hear you, and I didn't say this at the top of our meeting today, but for those who are still listening, and the committee had decided from the beginning in January that we would go through sentences beginning with the shortest sentences, and we started with probation and alternatives to incarceration, marching our way through the system, getting to longer and longer sentences, and I think we'll eventually hit LWOP and even death penalty cases. So it's just the way that we decided to organize our work this year. It has nothing to do with what deserves priority. I guess the last thing I'll say is, because you're the last speaker and because it's come up so often today, that having supportive family on the outside, being able to do in-reach and be supportive and helpful and hopeful to loved ones is extraordinary. Like I said, hope is an amazing emotion. I think even Governor Brown said something like that. It's stuff that we want to try to help improve. There's only so much that we control, obviously, here, and we're trying to be as thoughtful as we possibly can. And we really do appreciate your comments, your work with Debug. I'm a big fan, but also just the perseverance that you and your family have together. It's something that keeps me working every day. So with that said, I don't see anybody. Thank you, Yoli.
Thank you so much.
And I don't see anybody left to have any more comments. I will just say that thank you all. It's been a long day, but I've learned a lot. The committee is now in recess, and we will reconvene tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. to deliberate and go over some business. Thank you all. Have a good evening. And thanks again to Tom and the rest of the committee staff who pulled this together.